Today's meeting with Mr. Barroso came after a gathering of European finance ministers in the UK at the weekend and ahead of the G20 summit of world leaders in London on April the 2nd. Mr. Brown said there had to be a fundamental reform of global financial regulation and a rejection of protectionism.
The President comes to London at a particularly important time for Europe and for the global economy. Later this week, we will gather as European leaders to consider our plan for global economic recovery. And then we will have, on April the 2nd in London, the G20 meeting at which the President will be there. The plan that we agree at this G20 meeting will be comprehensive. It will cover the action we are taking to stimulate the global economy and to reform the global financial system. I want to emphasise our discussions today about the importance of stimulating trade around the world. The European Commission has a very important role to play, and as you know, we are seeing a large fall in world trade. The 1930s brought protectionism in response to recession. In 2009, we must tackle protectionism head on and make sure that we do not risk a spiral of trade collapse through the protectionism that is obviously a possible reaction to this crisis.
The Prime Minister said any economic stimulus package must help the world's poorest people, who've been hit hardest by the global recession.
And we want in the G20 to meet our commitments to developing countries. Europe has a moral responsibility to make sure the needs of the poorest, who are in the end the hardest hit by this global recession, are not brushed aside. They need us more, not less than ever. And that's why we are calling on our countries in the G20 to meet their aid pledges, to meet their promises and renew their commitment to supporting poorer countries through this crisis. The G20 summit, which representatives of Africa will attend, representatives I'll be meeting later today, a number of presidents and prime ministers from African countries, must be a fairness summit for the poorest and vulnerable.
Mr. Barroso said the world recession was affecting every European household. He said there was a need to get ethics back into the financial system.
Apart from the fiscal stimulus, apart from the improved regulation and supervisory mechanisms, we need a real commitment to openness, to do everything we can to resist economic nationalism and protectionism. We must resist the temptation of economic nationalism. We must be clear that protectionism is a blind alley to nowhere. It is not a credible option internally in Europe or externally. That is why the single market, European single market, is so important. Because of it, Europe is now a real integrated market, and each European Union citizen is on average over £450 better off each year. And of course we need to conclude the Doha round as soon as we can. That is essential. This week we'll agree in summit in Brussels the European response for the G20 meeting in London. Europe must speak with one voice in London, and I think we will do that.
The two men were meeting ahead of the G20 gathering of the world's biggest economies in London in April, at which action to beat the global recession will top the agenda.